Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson here. As always, our podcast is brought to you by the folks at WynnBET. We thank them for their exclusive sponsorship all season long. My guest today is Drew Davenport. He is with FootballGuys. He is an auction specialist. Easy for me to say, apparently. He's also an attorney and is really good at breaking down issues. He's a good auction player. I got to know him through Jim Coventry a little bit earlier this year, had him on the XM show. Happy to have him aboard here now. Drew, welcome. I think we got you on.
All righty. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I'm excited to be here. Appreciate it.
No problem. So I'm a recovering attorney. So I just play the home game. My wife is an attorney, and I graduated from law school, never practiced. I got sworn in, all that good stuff. But I got out also. So I'll just learn from you guys.
Congrats on getting out. I should have gotten out.
What type of practice do you have?
Well, right now I'm a public defender.
Okay.
And actually, I shouldn't say right now. I've been doing that for 16 years. I took a little bit of a backwards, I guess, track, you should say, because most people start out in public and then they go private. I went the opposite way. I started out in private, decided I really wanted to do criminal defense full time. And it's hard to find a firm that does only criminal defense work. You end up doing DR stuff. I didn't really want to do that. So I ended up at the public defender's office for the last 16 years.
Oh, cool. Very cool. That's awesome to hear. We'll talk a little bit more about that perhaps at the end of the podcast, but it's cool to see what you're doing. Let's jump right into the news. Starting off the trade deadline and the lack of news. There was very little. There was Von Miller, which I think was the biggest trade of the week. There was the Chiefs trading for a backup tight end, trading away a lineman that wasn't starting for them. The only fantasy position player that really got dealt at all was Mark Ingram last week. And I would have thought we've seen a little bit more than that. But the NFL trade deadline certainly isn't like other sports.
Yeah, it's tough. I think one of the things that we're seeing this year too is all the injuries are really testing teams' depth. And I think when they think about making a trade, they think, gosh, that could be us pretty quickly, losing this guy or that guy. So depth seems like a mirage, but also, it's hard to find somebody with the cap space, the right need. You don't want to trade them to a rival. It's tough in the NFL to get those deals done. And it pretty much went predictably quiet.
Yeah. And I think the cap space is harder in the NFL than it is in the NBA and NHL a little bit there. I think they've had the ability to be a little bit more creative, or perhaps that's just my perception. But I do think that is a big limiting factor there is trying to, make these contracts work, especially midstream like this.
Yeah, for sure. And, we saw that with LA getting Von Miller. And I think that Denver's paying like $9 million of his $9.7 million salary. So I think that's a huge consideration.
Yeah, and you almost have to look at that as two trades too, because considering they traded a linebacker to the Broncos the previous week, also there in a way to try to open up some space.
Yeah, it's and the whole thing with Watson and with there's a lot of hurdles. The NFL's tough. I wanted to see some guys move, like Allen Robinson, maybe see Jameson Crowder go somewhere. Just some things to open up some avenues for production, either from that person or because they're leaving and the guy behind them can step up, like Elijah Moore or something. But man, tough and / boring day.
Yeah, I thought Tennessee might trade for someone. I thought maybe Melvin Gordon might go because they were willing to trade away Von Miller. Perhaps maybe they also trade Gordon too. But then again, they do value their own depth.
Yeah, and why wouldn't Tennessee with the troubles that Julio Jones has had staying on the field? Why wouldn't they be in the market for somebody that could be a little bit somebody they could count on a little bit more? I don't get it.
Yeah, and the question might be inventory too. I mean, the Saints wanted to trade for a receiver and couldn't. And that leads us to our next option, our next item. That is Michael Thomas. News this morning broke of a setback with his ankle. No due date now for his return from the PUP list.
Yeah, well, I think that he literally within the last half hour, 45 minutes, put out his own statement. I'm not sure if you saw that on Twitter.
I have not, actually.
Yeah,
I was getting my kids out the door.
I understand that, definitely. I got 2 little ones myself. But yeah, he tweeted out his own statement. Sounds like he is done for the year.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That's too bad. Yeah, and I was hoping. I only had him in one of my leagues, and it was one where I was kind of waiting on receivers, so I thought I needed to take a swing at some upside. But he was already late from our hopes and expectations, however realistic that they were. This is brutal.
Yeah, it's tough. It underscores one of the things that I have really taken heart in the last couple of years. I used to be the guy that would go into the draft and say at the end of the draft, I'm going to get this injured guy, and he's going to sit on the back of my roster until he comes back. And then, wow, look at my team when he comes back. But I tell you what, the rate of success of that kind of tactic is just so low that a couple years ago, me and my buddy, we had this conversation and we just made a pact like, stop drafting these injured guys. It just doesn't work. And I think Michael Thomas is exhibit like 400 on that. So like, AJ Green was last year, and
absolutely
it just doesn't work. So I'm off it completely. Every once in a while it's going to work, but the number of times you're going to miss, I'm happy, missing out on one of these guys every once in a while who actually does make it back and makes a difference.
That's right. My good buddy Scott Pianowski from Yahoo always likes to say injuries come into the league. Why start with some? If you already have that known injury, why bring that in? I don't necessarily believe in injury-prone players. I mean, I think some guys might be, but I don't like applying that label. I think that sometimes is unfair. But if there's a known injury, I'll just usually move on. And of course, in this one time, I did take a shot. One of my NFFC teams, I did that. But we'll move on.
I think that's the right spot to take a shot, though, in one of those type of competitions. Absolutely.
Yeah. Jackpot league, as Jim likes to say.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Scott makes a great point, and it applies to trades too. I think that so many people get excited about like, well, I'm buying low on this guy because he's going to be out 3 weeks. And you just don't know. And especially with like hamstrings, we're seeing that with McCaffrey. I've seen a lot of people dropping Ricky Seals-Jones onto the wire. Now, I know he had a bad week, and Logan Thomas is supposed to come back. But we all know how that goes. And just trading for or going for these injured guys, the likelihood of success is so low. I just wouldn't get into it.
I'm with you on that. I think that's the sharp play. Adrian Peterson is officially a Titan. I know he got signed to the practice squad with the expectation he'll be activated pretty quickly. My first wave of fabs happened last night. I saw him go for one person 70% of their budget. I get it. It's a 16-team league. It's hard to find players, but I'm not there for that.
Yeah, neither am I. So I'm in 3 or 4 14-teamers this year, which is more than I'm usually in. Right. And a couple of those leagues, actually, Peterson was picked up through the waiver process because he was a free agent. He was able to be picked up like on Sunday afternoon. I think ESPN had him set that way, but a couple different sites did. So I didn't see as much bidding on Peterson, but I will say that I saw your tweet last night that said that Peterson had gone for 71. And I thought, wow, that's crazy, because I was trying to get McNichols in a couple of these deep leagues just because as a PPR back, I think that he's going to be a guy with a reasonable floor. And these 14-teamers it's tough to find production this time of year. So when I saw your 71 on Peterson, I thought, oh man, not yours, but that you had seen that. I thought that's rough because I'm probably not getting McNichols. I think I had 46 of my 100 left in one league, and I threw the whole thing at McNichols. I did not get him. So to your point, though, about Peterson, I'm just worried about the fact that we all keep saying, it's Adrian Peterson, but he's 36 now. Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah. And I think that as far as PPR leagues go and in deep leagues, yeah, sure, you want to get a guy who's going to be getting some touches, and I would guess that he's the goal line guy. But if I'm in a PPR league, I prefer McNichols at this point.
I share your opinion. And certainly this week, maybe in the ensuing couple of weeks, I got to imagine there's got to be some build-up time for Peterson. I know running back is more turnkey than any other position, but even then, it still takes some time.
Yeah. And you might see a conditioning injury too. I mean, it's just throwing $70 or 70%. I get it in deep leagues. I do, but I'm not excited about Peterson's prospects. He's going to be hit or miss, and there's going to be those weeks, where he has 18 carries for 41 yards and doesn't catch a pass, and that's tough to put in your lineup every week.
Yeah, especially if none of those carries are at the goal line.
Exactly.
You can see that. Confirm. Yeah, he is 36. March of '85. So.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Little steep. And
36 for a power back. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, McNichols is interesting too. I think he's kind of the last man standing. He is a good. I wish Tennessee threw to their backs more frequently. But if Julio remains out, maybe they will.
Yeah, and McNichols did have a fair amount of work in the passing game before Henry went down.
Yeah,
so
true.
I'm just hoping that they pair that with 8 or 10 carries. And even if he's only getting 6 or 8 and he's still catching 4 or 5 passes, I think he's got some nice PPR value.
Yeah. Sterling Shepard's going to miss more time with his quadriceps strain. The Giants just can't stay healthy. I mean, Tony gets a fluky laceration on his hand. Shepard's had multiple times now out. They got their bye next week too. So I think they'll be a little cautious this week with a lot of their players.
Yeah, I was talking with, I don't know if you follow Dr. Jesse Morris on Twitter.
I do.
I was talking with him last week, and he made the point that you always have to pay attention to buys with these injury situations because they want to hold the guy out. If you hold him out one more game and then they've got to buy, that gives them essentially 2 full weeks of extra recovery time. I would not expect to see Saquon Barkley. And I think the news did break that Shepard's going to miss at least a couple games. And boy, the way he reacted when he went down sure didn't seem like a normal strain.
No,
that just, but he looked like he was in pain, like he had ruptured something in the muscle or in the knee. So yeah, I have Dante Pettis, believe it or not, from the week 7 by Mageddon in a couple leagues. And I don't think I'm ready to release him yet just because of all the problems. Now he's banged up too, but
that's true. Got hurt on that punt play. Yeah.
If Tony can come back from the laceration and play, he might be in a huge spot filling in for Shepard in the slot.
Yeah, that's right. And going against the Raiders, I think that's a good setup for him there. I would like to see what his practice is like though before I really kind of commit to that. But this is why we do updates to our rankings. We have an initial one and then we update as we get the news accordingly. Before we move on, quick note from our friends at WinBet. If there's one thing we appreciate here at RotoWire, it's making your decisions, and even more so, making the right decision. Listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you with RotoWire's newest partner, WinBet, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WinBet is now the exclusive sponsor for RotoWire's fantasy podcast. WinBet brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more at your fingertips. Want a break from sports betting? Head into WinBet's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down on blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at baccarat. WinBet is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia, while rapidly expanding. At WinBet, the possibilities are limitless. WinBet is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WinBet now. That's WYNNBET. WinBet, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's fantasy podcast. I'm here with Drew Davenport from FootballGuys. You can catch him on Twitter. You can catch him at FootballGuys. At his Twitter handle is at Drew FBG Auctions, and you can check that out for FootballGuys FBG. We got a question in the chat forum for you. Before we start breaking down the Week 9 ranks, a quick question for the rest of the season. Curious for your perspective. With Henry out, who's the rest of the season king? He personally thinks Jonathan Taylor, but Kupp, Kamara, Adams, Cook. What's your thought there?
Well, I'll tell you what, this may seem like low-hanging fruit, but I was looking into Dalvin Cook last week for a roundtable we did over at Football Guys, and his season really sets up well. I know he had a bad game this week, and actually he's got another tough matchup with the Ravens coming up this week, but the rest of the season schedule for Cook sets up really well. The run defenses that he's going to see the rest of the season, I believe outside of maybe like Pittsburgh, the schedule is just fantastic. So yeah, he's got the Chargers, of course, which are quite possibly the softest run defense in the league coming up.
Right.
And then he goes to Packers, Niners, Lions. And then wait, I'm sorry, is that right? Yeah, and then he goes Pittsburgh's tough. But then, Chicago, he's got Green Bay again later. I think Dalvin Cook's the guy I want at running back the rest of the season. I think if you got a frustrated Cook manager after the performance this past week and upcoming against Baltimore, that's a prime spot to strike and lock him up for the rest of the nice stretch run he's got.
I think you're right. I like that. I like that call. And yeah, it starts with the Ravens this week, and Yeah, I think you can attack the Ravens. Joe Mixon and P. Ryan both had good runs against them a couple weeks ago. We'll see what they did to address everything after the bye, but they had, they're kind of reeling a little bit, and they haven't been the typical Ravens defense that we've expected to see all season long.
Yeah, they haven't, and you're right. There was a couple bright spots there for the Bengals run offense, and I believe in Minnesota. And if nothing else, they're going to keep banging their head against the wall, even if they're not successful. They're going to keep giving him the ball. So, yeah, I'm not super scared of the Baltimore matchup, but I do think that if you've got a frustrated Cook manager, especially playing through the injuries, he should be at the healthiest he is right now. We haven't heard about any setbacks, and he's just coming off a bye. So, yeah.
All right. Let's start to look at this week's rankings, because I think there's some tough calls. Justin Herbert, we are talking on the Chargers on the defensive side of things, but Herbert has had back-to-back down games before the bye and then after the bye. Has he been, quote unquote, solved, or is this just a tough stretch?
Boy, I'm going to fence it. I know everybody loves that. I think it's probably a little bit of both. I do think that there are some tendencies that they're starting to figure out, but I also think that going up against Belichick, you can't really say that that's going to be a trend, because Belichick had Herbert's number last year. Looks like he still had it this year too.
Sure.
I think that oh my gosh, I just got breaking news. Aaron Rodgers, COVID-19
Oh
is
my
out
goodness.
for
I just saw
Sunday's
that.
game. Holy cow. That's brutal. Well, with those of us who didn't have Adams last week, now I'm not going to have Rodgers. Oh, that's brutal. Okay. Sorry. So I think that when you talk about Herbert, I'm not too worried about him. I'm not, but I do think this week is a tough week because Philly has become a bit of a run funnel, because over at Football Guys we have our fantasy points against stats, and I was looking at Philly before we came on. They've allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks this year so far. And I don't think that their pass defense is necessarily lights out. They're a middle of the pack defense according to Football Outsiders DVOA.
Yeah.
And their pass defense is actually a little bit ahead of that. They're 12th. But so I don't think that they're a lights out. So I'm not super scared of Herbert, but it may be another bit of a situation where he's going to be a little bit more disappointing than you want him to be this week, because they're a bit of a run funnel, and I think that Chargers are really going to be able to run the ball well.
I think you're right about that. And they're like, I remember going back to the Dallas game, there was a lot of talk about how they're keeping their safety so far back. I was reading an article by Robert Mays in The Athletic just yesterday, talking about how all these teams, the big thing now is playing both safeties back a lot more, just trying to present some different front, rush fronts and some different fronts, but taking away all those deep plays, forcing teams to be patient, forcing them to run the ball a lot more. And I got to wonder if, Mahomes, we've seen him be a little impatient on Monday night. The first drive was working great. They went away from that. He's trying to take shots and ran into some problems. I wonder if the same thing's happening with Herbert. They're trying to take away Mike Williams and all the downfield stuff he can do. And I think that is exactly what Philly's been doing anyhow.
I think that's a great point. And Williams has been tough to have, because it was 3 games ago, I think he got 16 targets against Cleveland. And then he hurts himself. Clearly wasn't himself before the bye. But I thought coming out of the bye, we'd see a different Mike Williams. But again, it's the Patriots. I'm not sure that I can draw a lot of conclusions from that. But if Philly's going to drop back, I think your point is extremely, dead on. That if Philly's going to do the same thing, then they're going to turn around and hand the ball to Eckler and throw him 8 passes. And, it may be another tough week to have Mike Williams too.
Yeah, it might be. And it's just, the NFL, it's always give and take, right? One type of defense is popular for a while. Teams find a way to beat it. Certain type of offense gets popular. Defenses adjust. It's this little cat and mouse game. And right now that's the new trend, it seems like.
For sure. I agree.
Other quarterback issues. Kyler Murray, he's dealing with the ankle issue. Even if he plays, he hasn't really been the running quarterback that we expected anyhow. It's at San Francisco sneakily has been pretty good defensively. He didn't do much against the Niners prior to the Niners bye week. This might not be a great matchup for him.
No, it's not. The only thing that gives me a little ray of hope is seeing Justin Fields have some success running against them this week. But I'm sorry, my phone's buzzing here on these
No
these
problem.
Packers
All the
updates.
alerts, yes.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, so I think that I'm a little concerned about Murray. I've got him in a couple leagues, and I think that not only does he have this ankle thing, but he got banged up the previous week, and I think things are starting to pile up. And what we saw last season with the shoulder injury was that it really did hurt his effectiveness. And we saw in the first half of last season, he ran for like 8 touchdowns in the first half, and then and stopped running. And I think that it might be a trend here that they're saying, hey, we don't want you out there getting hurt. So he's not running as much. That concerns me against San Francisco. Their pass defense is pretty strong. If I was looking at it earlier, and their pass DVOA was it's actually middle of the pack. It's not that amazing, but they've been pretty strong against quarterbacks. And yeah, I'm concerned about Murray, especially if he tries to go, and they're describing this as a 1 to 3 week injury. Yeah, I'm concerned if he decides to go. I think in the leagues I've got him, I've got to run him out there, but it's hard to find a better option.
Yeah.
But especially with Hopkins, he only played 8 snaps or ran 8 routes last week. I don't think it was snaps. I think 8 routes last week. We don't know how healthy he is. Yeah, it's a definite concern, but I don't know how you find a better option on the wire at this point.
No, the only place I could is a guillotine league I'm in, and I've got Murray. So now I have to make that tough call. And
Yeah.
I've been like sneaking by every single week. It's like second to last, third to last. That's all I need. Just don't be last. And then quietly getting a little bit better. But I'm gonna have to make some tough decisions after the show here. Rodgers was one of the teams that was available too. One of the quarterbacks that was available on the waiver wire too. So
and what a great matchup! Gosh, that's I feel like we got robbed of the Green Bay Arizona game, and then we're going to get Adams and Lazard back, and we're going to have this Green Bay Kansas City game, and now we're getting robbed of that too.
I know, it's awful. It's awful.
COVID, man.
Yeah, I know. So let's address that. Jordan Love. We've never seen him in a real NFL game, at least in terms of where it mattered. Now we're going to see him thrown into the fire right away here. What do we do with Adams? What do we expect out of Love? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it really limits Adams to maybe being a top end wide receiver 2, middle of the road wide receiver 2. I think he's still going to have plenty of volume. And now, this is pure speculation, but a lot of times these backup quarterbacks come in and they're one read guys, and so they're going to drop back and lock onto their first read. And more often than not, that's going to be Adams. So I still think there's going to be volume there for Adams, and I don't think you can put him on the bench. And but I think all the other skill position players sort of fall away. I think you just can't trust any pass catcher outside of Adams, and of course you're running Aaron Jones out there. But other than that, I think it just really pairs the fantasy tree down to 1 or 2 guys.
I'd agree. Maybe if you squint, you can put in AJ Dillon just because they're going to be ground chucking it so much again. But Love is the only healthy quarterback. Just saw this from Pelissero too. Their practice squad QB also tested positive. Kurt Bankert also tested positive earlier this week. So Jordan Love is the only healthy QB right now for the Packers.
Goodness.
I don't know what happens.
Yeah, what happens if you go into they have to bring somebody in to hold the clipboard, but if Love goes down, holy cow.
Yeah, what a mess.
Brutal.
What a big mess. So I'm sure we'll be scrambling about that all day, talking about that. Moving on to running backs real quick. Nick Chubb, I expected a little bit more volume last week. I know the Steelers are a tough matchup. Draw Cincinnati this week. We saw what Michael Carter did against them. Yeah, if Michael Carter can make people miss tackles, certainly Nick Chubb can, right?
You would think so. And I'm hoping that the lack of work that Chubb got this week was just them ramping him up and wanting to be careful with him. It was certainly frustrating as a Chubb manager to see Dearness Johnson get in there for the goal line carry. Gosh, that's and it seems to be, and I made this point last year when Chubb got hurt and we all thought Hunt was going to go nuclear. They really just subbed in someone else in the Chubb role. And that seems to be Stefanski's way that he just got a notification. Rodgers is not vaccinated. So that's why he's already been ruled out. That's interesting. So yeah, unfortunate, but yeah. So I think that Stefanski, what he likes to do is, I think he likes to stick guys in these roles, and I don't think we can necessarily count on an expanded role just because there's an injury. So I
Yeah.
think that we're seeing more of that because we saw maybe Dearness Johnson and Felton kind of come in and take the Hunt role, and there wasn't the volume we wanted for Chubb. I do think though that Cincinnati can be had. I think they're a stronger defense than we thought they'd be coming into the year, and I'm worried about the Browns' offense in general. So I do knock Chubb a little bit, not necessarily for the matchup, but just because I think the offense has been weaker than we thought, and I don't see signs of that recovering right now. And maybe that's partially um, Baker's shoulder. I don't know, but I
Yeah.
am concerned. Their last 3 games, I don't think they've been over 17 points.
I don't think any Twitter video is going to get OBJ going. We'll see about that. But, one of the things is the Browns they were just so ineffective. They ran fewer plays. Harder to get that volume up for your running backs if you're running fewer plays. That game flew by, too. A lot
Yeah.
of running and just, yeah, I do, do the rewatch on every game. And I think that one ran 33 minutes. Some of them go like 50. Now, some of that's editing and good cutting, but a lot of that it was a quick game.
Yep. Yep. That's a concern.
Denver running backs. We all, if you're on football Twitterverse, everybody wants Javante Williams to get more carries, more work. The Broncos, they don't see it that way. They are pretty steadfast in going 50-50. And honestly, Melvin Gordon was more effective last week. So, maybe not the week before when it was Williams shredding tackles and all that. But what do we do with these guys going forward? Is there a period of time where we see Williams step up in that workload, or is this going to be this way the rest of the year?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think that's what we're looking at because I don't see that there's a reason for Denver to want to switch it up. And a lot of times, what we like to do in the Twitter sphere is, well, we know Javante's the future, but these teams don't care. They understand that it's a long season, it's a grind.
Mm-hmm.
They do not care. They want the 2 options there. And Melvin Gordon, frankly, has actually been pretty good.
Yep.
This past week, Gordon saw 57% of the snaps. Williams had 43%. Now, I think Williams got dinged up during the game, but he ended up coming back and playing. But so I think he missed a few snaps. But yeah, they're committed to the 50-50. And not only that, but even the routes run, they're both seeing a sort of equal amount. So you can't really say that one or the other is taking over a passing game role or anything.
Right.
And I think, this past week, I know that Gordon got 3 red zone opportunities and Williams got none, but I don't think that's a product of they like Gordon in the red zone. I think it really comes down to who's in the game and whose drive it is when they get down there to score. So it's going to continue to be frustrating. And this week is a tough spot. Dallas
Yeah.
stops the run well, but I think that they got a couple smash spots coming up with Philly and the Chargers, and then they followed up with the Chiefs and the Lions. So you got 4 monster spots for the Denver running backs after this week. There's a bye thrown in there, but 4 really monster matchups. So hold on to those Denver guys, and
Yeah.
they'll be fine.
Yeah. Don't do anything crazy like dropping Williams for Adrian Peterson, for instance. Just do not do that. I'm sure we'll see it. I know Jeff Mans always throws out during his Tuesday or was Wednesday show. Show me the bad free agent moves and people screenshot them and all that during his show and all that. So I could see that happening. A lot of Peterson related ones. I don't think it's going to be as disastrous as Josh Gordon, but I think it's going to be less than what you expect. Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, quickly do a couple of wide receivers before we move on to our next main issue. But DJ Moore, it's got to be frustrating lately. Quarterback play. You don't know who's going to be the quarterback this week. PJ Walker doesn't look the part, and Sam Darnold's really struggled lately. We'll see if he comes back from the concussion. Plus, they've decided they want to run the ball like 400 times per game. So it leaves DJ Moore in a tough spot.
Yeah, I think that's more probably the coaches reacting to the fact that they're struggling so mightily in the passing game that they got to get something going on the ground to take some pressure off of Darnold. At least I'm guessing that's what it is. But yeah, the that Carolina offensive line is a major problem.
It is.
Pro Football Focus has them ranked as the 30th ranked pass blocking unit, and they're only 23rd ranked run blocking. So it's just the offensive line has been a huge problem. I don't think that Sam Darnold, here's the thing. The Pro Football Reference actually has Darnold as being 12th best in the league in on-target throws. So when he throws the ball, he's an accurate thrower. But I think he's having trouble with the reads and the offense and
Yep.
what he – so I think he's having trouble with the mental side of the game. And after the first 3 games, the honeymoon, like you were referencing earlier, they got tape on what they're trying to do in Carolina. And you subtract Christian McCaffrey and what he does to move the chains, and it creates a whole it's just a morass. I don't know another way to say it, but terrible offensive line play. Quarterback's not getting through his reads. Wide
Terrible
receivers
receiver play too.
Yeah, oh yeah. This is crazy. So the number one guy, this was coming into this week. I have not looked at the drop numbers, but coming in is this. Regardless, doesn't matter. The point is, the number one guy was Deebo Samuel had 7 drops, but tied for second was both Robbie Anderson and Chuba Hubbard had 6, and DJ Moore had 5. So essentially his top 3 options between Moore, Anderson, and Hubbard have combined for 17 drops already, and easily tops in the league.
Not all of those were in the Minnesota game either. It just seemed like it, but
it felt like it. It felt like it.
Yeah.
And I'm heavily invested in the Panthers, believe me. So it's been brutal. It's a combination of a lot of things. I don't know how they're going to dig out of it because that offensive line isn't suddenly going to get better. But I think Christian McCaffrey can be a Band-Aid for a lot of things, but hell, we don't know if he's going to be healthy either. So I'm officially worried. But DJ Moore is certainly, while he's taking a hit, I don't think it's a guy that you can bench at this point.
I agree. I got some pressure saying I should have him lower, but then again, some of the guys that I'm right near around him, I'm not that, like Devontae Smith versus DJ Moore. I'm probably going to still go Moore. It's just, especially I think this week against the Chargers, I think they're going to run up there. It's going to be a heavy run game for both sides there. Perhaps we'll see about that. But to your point about the offensive line, I'm a Bengals fan, and Michael Jordan was their starting right guard for a good chunk of the season. He ended up on Carolina this year after the Bengals let him go, and he's been getting a lot of playing time. He is on the struggle bus. He is a guy that really struggled last year, one of the lowest rated linemen according to PFF. And when I saw that he was getting a lot of playing time for Carolina, I knew that their options were pretty thin.
Yeah. And if you're taking a guy from Cincinnati who already did not have a good offensive line themselves, now they're better this year, but if you're taking a guy from Cincinnati, you're in trouble.
Yeah, then it's definitely going to be that way. Tight end, real quick. We'll go to a question in the audience on this one here. Pitts or Kelsey, rest of season? Who do you like?
It's still Kelsey for me. There's a little bit of panic out there, and I can understand it. I think the Chiefs will get sorted. I really do. I do think that Mahomes is struggling right now, and the entire offense is. This is weird to say. They're struggling to find their identity because they've been a deep shot team. And everyone's sitting back in deep shells and taking that away. So they're trying to figure themselves out. Andy Reid's a really smart guy. Mahomes is still one of the best in the league. So I don't think it's time to panic. I do think that the Pitts usage, it's right there. It's right there. The problem is I do think that having Ridley on the field will have, having him off the field is going to have an impact. It's going to be a negative impact on Pitts, in my opinion. But yeah, I'm still going Kelsey.
Yeah, I agree. And I think to your point on Ridley, I think you're absolutely right. I was, watching that game. They were just draped all over Pitts. Sometimes it kind of surrounded him in a play. There's a play that was called for PI, but he had 4 guys around him on the play. I was like, wow.
I remember watching some of it and thinking, I don't know if this is anecdotal because it's one of those things where I'm watching these TVs behind me. I've got 5 games going and I'm not listening to some of them, but I'm watching. And every time I look up, I see Pitts with 2 or 3 guys on them. And I think, I don't know if it's anecdotal, but at this point, I'm concerned that Ridley missing is going to be a long-term problem.
Yeah, I agree. The funny thing is, no Ridley. Pitts has got all this coverage. Russell Gage got 0 targets in that game. Zero.
Wild.
Very wild.
Man, it's one of those weeks. We can talk about that, but one of those weeks where just weird stuff happened and you just throw up your hands and go, as an analyst, like, what are you supposed to do on some of this stuff?
100% agree. Got a couple more topics to hit up, but a quick couple of notes as well before we move on. First from Yahoo, the new NFL season is underway, and Yahoo is excited to kick off daily fantasy football. There will be a ton of big prize contests throughout the season on Yahoo, including their multi-entry contest now being shark-free. To celebrate the beginning of football season and Yahoo Daily Fantasy becoming shark-free, Yahoo is giving all users the opportunity to claim free $10 in contest entry credit. Users can take advantage of this free $10 contest entry credit offer to join one of Yahoo's biggest contests. In addition to the free credit, Yahoo has a $1 million DFS football contest live. The $1 million contest features $1 million in total prizes, including first place receiving $100,000 and an entry to the first ever Yahoo Fantasy Football Championship live finals event, which will occur at MGM National Harbor in Maryland this December. Play daily fantasy football on Yahoo this season. Visit sports.yahoo.com/dailyfantasy/welcome to claim the free $10 offer to get started. We also want to bring you a quick note from our friends at Thrive. Thrive is back for another season of fantasy football, and they're running huge guaranteed contests each week this NFL season. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Sign up today and get a free 6-month RotoWire subscription. Here's how you can claim your free RotoWire subscription. 1. Visit rotowire.com/thrive. 2. Deposit a minimum of $10 and receive a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. And 3, play in your first paid contest and receive that free 6-month RotoWire subscription. Big thanks to our sponsors there from Yahoo, Thrive, and the Blue Wire Network. I'm Jeff Erickson here with Drew Davenport. You can find Drew at FootballGuys.com. You can also follow him on Twitter at DrewFBGAuctions. Really good follow, especially when there's interesting topics intersect the legal world and the fantasy football world. It's tough to talk about guys like DeSean Watson. DeSean Jackson is a little easier to talk about right now. But DeSean Watson, or talking about Calvin Ridley or Henry Ruggs, which broke yesterday. It's necessary to talk about them, though, too. We don't want to have to do it. It's uncomfortable, but we kind of need to do so.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think that is underplayed in especially in our business is the role that mental health has on the actions of these guys.
Right.
And that comes down to guys like Josh Gordon too. I think it's easy to get on Twitter and fire off a funny tweet about Josh can't put the blunt down. In reality, Josh Gordon has some mental health issues.
Right.
And I think that that's the same thing that's in play here with Calvin Ridley. And it's one of the things that I do in my job every day that I did not realize was going to be such a big part of my job. When I took the job, I had no clue. But what happens is, if you allow me a 20-second rant here.
Please do so.
What happens is there's not a lot of excitement in our communities and when we go to the voting booth about mental health issues. And so what happens is we continue to elect people that take away the resources, the community resources. They close mental health treatment centers. They don't put the funding towards it. It's not something sexy that you go to the voting booth for.
Right.
And so people don't care about it, but then they care about it when it matters to them. And I would venture to say that the majority of people have had an issue or had a problem affect them that's been mental health related, and they didn't realize it. And so the end of the rant is this. In my job, I see mental health issues every day because unfortunately what happens is when you cut the funding to those mental health treatment facilities and professionals and community programs, then it falls on the criminal justice system. And you have people who are not qualified trying to handle it. You have, COs in the jail trying to deal with it. And you have, me, I'm not a trained mental health professional. Now, over 16 years of doing it as a public defender, I've learned a lot about it. But that's really what we're talking about here. And I've got to be honest, DeSean Watson, when we talk about Watson, there's some mental health issues there. Now, I don't know whether it's just some sort of, overblown malignant narcissism or if it's true mental health issues, but there's something going on there because the allegations, if you read the civil suits, and I don't want to get too into the weeds, but if you read the civil suits, some of the behavior alleged, that's not something you or I think is normal behavior. So there is a mental health issue there. And so I really believe that talking about this stuff is the first step that we have to have, because if we don't understand that a lot of the genesis of these problems is the mental health stuff, then we're missing it right out of the gate. And it's hard to do, but it's necessary to do, because if you don't talk about it, then people just don't have any idea that that's why it's going on.
Right. I think our awareness is getting it's getting sharpened a little bit. I mean, we saw Simone Biles in the Olympics. I mean, that really brought that conversation to the forefront. Now, there's a lot of other stuff going on with the USA Gymnastics that is related to that too,
Right.
and with the Nasser case and all that, and how bad that's how bad that's been. But with Ridley, I mean, the tough part for us is we don't know what the issue is. It's not our right to know, and yet at the same time, you know, fantasy players, they have. It's our job to tell them what a player's value is to us. Can I play my player this week? How long am I going to be able to not be without him? What should I do? These are things we have to answer.
Yeah, it is really hard because, for instance, I wrote an article about Henry Ruggs yesterday.
Yeah,
and it's really hard to get into that article and want to give someone football advice when
right.
a young woman just lost her life, and now it's going to affect Ruggs's the rest of his life. And there was a passenger in his car that was seriously
Right.
injured
His
as
girlfriend.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's hard to get into that and say, okay, now here's what you want to do in dynasty leagues. That's hard, but I think you can just preface it by saying, I understand that you come to Football Guys for football advice, so here's my football advice. Having said that, a lot of times what I say, in the Watson case, I lead in by saying, keep in mind that there are 22 to 24 women. Their lives are never going to be the same. And I'm not talking about the incident itself, although that's traumatic in and of itself. I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about, I guarantee that when they had to name those names for the civil suit, there was a dust up because Busby filed all the suits under Jane Doe, and then the court made a ruling that they had to go ahead and file their actual name. So I know that one woman dropped out because she didn't want her name out there. And that's the thing. You have to understand the reality of when we're talking about this stuff is it's
Right.
easy to be flip on Twitter, and it's easy to go on a show and make jokes or make comments about it. These women, their lives are going to be changed forever. I guarantee they're getting messages, they're getting threats, they're getting all this grief because they want to come forward and say, hey, this thing happened to me. And that's an unfortunate just part of our society in general. But you have to have that in mind. These are people, their lives are forever changed when these incidents happen.
Right. That's right. And I think you need to approach it from that way. And you had a really good thread a couple of weeks ago talking, talking about the nuances between cases and charges and what, the process. And you've been on a defending side here. Sometimes the wheels of justice move slowly, but usually not this slowly with DeSean Watson. But it's also a very highly unusual case,
Yeah.
though, too.
Yeah. It's been really slow. I got to be honest. It kind of blows me away. I do think that there's a couple things at play that make it slower, but one of those is, of course, when you're going after a celebrity or somebody like DeSean Watson, you really got to button it up. Not that you
Mhm.
shouldn't do a good job in other cases, but you really got to have everything buttoned up. I think also they're dealing probably with one of the delays is probably they're trying to get contemporaneous evidence about the incidents, and what that means is that they're trying to go through social media, Instagram messages, text messages, things like that. That stuff is actually difficult to obtain through subpoena. And I've been told on more than one occasion by Verizon or different carriers that they don't keep text message information. Now, I went to a continuing legal education seminar where I heard that that was largely something they say to blow people off, and that
Right.
that
Right.
the police officers have better luck, and that shouldn't be how the system works. But the bottom line is what they're doing is walking through a bunch of red tape, subpoenas to get information from Instagram, from
Mm-hmm.
text messages, from cell phone carriers, and so that contemporaneous information is going to be really important in the Watson case because there's not going to be a lot of physical evidence, and a lot of people say that to me, and they say, well, there's no evidence, and I say, well, you have to be careful on what you call evidence.
Right.
A lot of us are conditioned to watch TV shows and say, well, evidence is, DNA samples or a piece of hair or a fingerprint. But evidence in actual criminal cases that I deal with for the most part, a lot of times just comes down to testimony
Right.
and circumstantial evidence. which is all very much admissible and can be used against someone. But I think that it's easy to say, well, there's no evidence, but a lot of it's going to come down to testimony and statements that people made and conversations they had with friends at the time this stuff happened. That's all very tough to put together. So I understand that it's taking a while, but if you'd have told me that we'd be sitting here in November from some complaints made in April, I would have told you you're crazy, because 7 months I think is absurd. So either my theory at this point is that the delay is probably positive for Watson because they're not finding what they need. And so they're trying to make sure they check all the boxes before they come out and say, hey, we can't charge him with X, Y, or Z. We're probably going to charge him with a couple misdemeanors, but he's probably not going to have some felonies coming. That's my take on it. But, who knows? I don't know what they're looking at right now.
Yeah, that I think that's a really good point. There was a lot of talk yesterday from his attorney, and you tweeted this out, from the civil suits attorney, suggesting that the Dolphins were trying to pressure a lot of these complainants to settle. And because they didn't want to have that on their hands. They wanted to have a certain threshold, at least, which there's a whole lot of that going on. I don't even know how to parse that.
Boy, that's wild. That statement was wild. I mean, if you're an attorney and you see a statement like that, you kind of go, whoa, like that. I don't know how much. Okay, here's the thing. People have this idea about Tony Busby that he's just some ambulance chasing cretin, slimy guy. I don't know Tony Busby. Of course I don't. And he's done some kind of wacky, like, publicity things for some of his clients in the past.
Right.
So I get the impression of him. And I don't think it's undeserved. I think that he's done some things that have brought some heat on his tactics. Sure. But I will say, Busby's a really shrewd guy. He knows what he's doing. And he signed these women up because he's going to get results. And so I think it's a bad idea to underestimate Busby. And to that point, his statement, holy cow, if it's true that the Dolphins were coming at them to try to settle, wow, that's a bombshell. Now, I don't know if it's going to get the bombshell treatment, but that's a massive statement. I don't even know what to make of it. What I can say is that I think it bears out what I said in my last thread. And I made the analogy of a poker hand. Are you a poker player?
I am.
Okay.
Not a good one, but avid. Avid, but mediocre. Same with my golf game.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Well, so the point I had made was that if you're sitting there at the table and let's say you've got a suited ace in your hand and there's two of the same suit on the flop. So now you've got a flush draw and somebody makes a bet to you and you decide to shove all in. You have several ways that you can win the pot. You can win the pot because you can hit your overcards. Like you say, you can hit your ace and he has a pair. So you hit your ace and you win the pot. You can win the pot because you hit your flush. You can win the pot because he folds. There's a lot of ways that you can win the pot when you shove all in there. And what I said was, when people were asking me, do I pick up DeSean Watson? Now, I'll admit I picked him up in a couple leagues just, to play keep away. I didn't really think it was going to happen, but on the 20% chance or whatever that I was giving it, I was going to have him. But the point about the poker analogy is this. You're on the other side when you're trying to talk about Watson, that there were so many ways you could lose in the Watson situation, and that came to pass. And one of the ways was that there just wouldn't be a deal because there's too much in the way. And that all comes back to what Busby's statement was about, which is that there was just way too much to do within this last week. If they were really serious about settling, that should have started 2 months ago. And there's just no way, especially with the Houston Police Department investigation still hanging out there. There's just no way you can ram through 22 civil suits in this short period of time. And I just always thought there's too many ways to lose. Somebody's shoving all their chips in on you. And there's a lot of ways you can lose this pot. I just didn't see it as a high leverage play.
I agree. It's not like the legal system adheres to the NFL's trade deadline as their own deadline.
Yeah, Houston doesn't care.
Yeah,
the police department doesn't care.
Exactly. How did you get started providing information in the fantasy football sphere?
I tell you what, I every time I tell the story, I give a shout out to a couple different people. The first was I actually got on Twitter just because of the Tyreek Hill case. Okay. And I was watching and following it, and I thought to myself, gosh, there's people missing stuff here in this case, and they're really talking about stuff they don't know anything about. It
Sure.
frustrates me to hear people, talking about legal situations. I got in a discussion with a guy last night who was trying to tell me that my opinion about refusing breathalyzers was wrong, which is wild because I've done thousands of DUI cases. So,
Right.
that's how it goes. People just so anyway, that I got on Twitter for that and put out a long Tyreek Hill thread. And I give a shout out to Matt Schaff from Draft Sharks.
Yep.
He picked it up and retweeted it. And then Ryan McDowell, he ran with it. And then it just blew up. And so I credit those two guys as giving my chance. But then the guy who picked it up and gave me my shot was Joe Bryant. I got a DM from him saying, "Hey, this looks really good. We need a legal correspondent. And just as a bonus, you like auctions. We need some of that too. So what do you think?" So those three guys were instrumental in giving me my shot.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. How long ago was that? So it was what?
I'm sorry. Yeah, you asked when. That was June of 19. So I've only been in the space here. This is my third season.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. I just, man, June of 19 seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? It does.
It's so many crazy things that have happened since then. You've been playing, obviously, though, for a really long time. And I know you're big into auctions. You were tweeting about your home league a while back and some of the things that during draft season. How long has that league been going on?
We are in our 21st year.
Nice.
So we started right when I got out of law school, and we didn't do auction for the first 2 years. And then I got invited to another auction league, and I had played some rotisserie baseball auction stuff. And but once I got in this other auction league, I thought, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So I immediately switched my league to it. So we've been doing auction in my league for I think 18 years, but the league's been around 21.
That's fantastic. I've done a lot more baseball auctions and football auctions. It's true that's where it started. Like my original baseball league is the one that started RotoWire. We started the company in '97, but we were doing the league since like '94. I want to say '93, or at least that's when I joined. I think it started even before it started a couple years before I joined. And it's always been auction. In baseball, that was the original format, and so I've always loved auctions. And seeing it now getting applied in more and more football leagues, it's just the best. I absolutely adore auctions.
Yeah, and a funny story about that. The original baseball league that I was in, I was actually in a baseball auction in 8th grade. But
Nice.
I know this is funny when I talked to someone this summer, he had the same comment about my league. We went off of the original 260. I don't know if that was what you guys used, but we used a $260 cap. And we transferred that over to my football league. So we actually expanded the roster a little bit and made it 270. But everybody's like, "Why is your cap 270?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's pretty weird. It's a rotisserie baseball holdover."
That's so funny. My original baseball league is actually $15 because we used real dollars and bid on dime increments and all that.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, inflation's gotten up a little bit. Cost of leagues have gotten higher since then. But
that's cool.
Yeah, and we still do that with my baseball league. It's an old school AL only 4x4 league, but we include the Brewers because the Brewers were in the American League when this started and all that. It's got a lot of character. Cool. A lot of Brewers fans in the league are like, we can't lose the Brewers. No, so it's AL plus Brewers. It's fun. But I love the background there. And football auctions. I mean, it used to be the only advice used to be, okay, it's stars and scrubs. It's the way to go. And for a while that was true. But now leagues have evolved, roster spots have evolved. It's not so simple anymore.
No, it's not. And the advice I always give is it's really a sliding scale there. It's not.
Yeah.
You don't want to go stars and scrubs in a deep league.
Right.
You gotta go a little bit flatter the deeper the leagues go. And in your 8 and 10 team leagues, even your 12 team, it's a much more viable strategy to go stars and scrubs because you can work the wire and fill in some of those gaps. And you need positional advantages. So I believe in 10-team leagues, you can draft a nice solid roster, but then you're always going to be, hoping to play somebody who you can outscore with an average score. I think positional differentiation in 10-teamers, especially auctions, is king.
I'd agree with that. The quarterback position has become a bigger component of that now too lately. Standard practice used to be there's maybe 2 or 3 exceptional quarterbacks, but even then waiting on quarterbacks or going cheaper on quarterbacks as the case may be was a highly viable strategy. But in the last couple of years, positional advantage there at QB has been a big deal.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things I've been preaching is that you really have a you have a value gap, is what I've been calling it,
Mm-hmm.
because there are still auction drafters in your room who are going to want to wait no matter what. They're going to want to get a $1, $2, $4 quarterback. That's just how they're
Yep.
going to do it. And then there's going to be guys who go after the top guys, who go after Lamar and Mahomes and those kind of guys. And it creates a little bit of a in between, like between the guys who are always going to wait and the guys who are going to always pay up. There's a little gap in there. Last year, that was DeSean Watson for me. It was really successful. I got him pretty cheap in some auctions because people just were committed to
I
their
remember that.
strategy. Yeah, and then this year I think it was Tannehill. Now he's been a little bit up and down, but Jalen Hurts was one of the guys that you could get for a reasonable price, and even Dak Prescott. I ended up with Dak in a couple auctions because he wasn't necessarily as cheap as I wanted, but he was much cheaper than the top tiers. So I was really happy to sign up a guy in that explosive offense. So I think there is a value gap developing in auctions that you can exploit.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, and then the other big intersection of auction strategy and fantasy football is also when you spend your money in the auctions. A lot of people are big about spending early. Others are, I'm always going to wait and see if I can get those middle tier guys for the bargain. My experience is the more experienced the room is, the less viable it is to wait. That those middles get highly contested. Those prototypical like 4th through 6th round players actually get priced up quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that the more experience, I think you're right. The more experience that's in the room, the harder it is to wait around because you're not going to find deals on players that are going to be difference makers for your team anyway. So
Right.
what I always preach is to make sure that you know what you're after as far as the top of your roster and go after that hard early so that you know what you're spending on the top of your roster. And then you can
Yeah.
decide, well, can I wait or do I need to jump in and continue to build? But I think that it's easy to sit back and say, I'm going to wait on these values. But if you're in a room with good drafters, they know what you're doing and they know what they're doing. So
Right.
you're not going to find that. And I think it's more important to know what you want to spend. And when you see a player going in that neighborhood, then you go after him and you don't really worry about the raw dollars. I say that a lot. And when I say raw dollars, what I mean is I think when you go into a draft, you have the tendency to say, well, I'm not going to pay more than this for this guy. And that's just not a good way to do it because
Right.
that raw dollar amount is fine for preparation. But when you get in the room, it really only matters how it fits on your team as the draft is developing. So I throw the raw dollar values out the window and say, can I fit this guy on my team? Is this working for my particular build in this draft? And when you're in a veteran room, that's what it's all about. It's all about ignoring the raw dollars and can I fit this guy on my team?
Right. Right. Having the context to build a roster, knowing what the league values sometimes is important. Certainly, and of course, every politics are always local. You need to know what the scoring system is. Any quirks in the leagues, whether it's boosted tight end or QB flex. Obviously that changes everything. And I love those wrinkles because then it changes the valuations quite a bit. But I could go on forever about that and about options
So
generally.
could I.
But I know that I cannot go on forever. You've got a big event coming up today. I've got the show coming up. So Drew, I wanted to really thank you for jumping on board. This has been a joy talking with you, and hopefully we can cross paths again soon.
Jeff, I had a great time. I really enjoyed talking with you too, and all these topics are stuff I could talk about forever and ever. So maybe we'll do a switch around, and you can come on my show so we can get to chat again.
When is your show?
I drop it on Thursday mornings, but it was typically just a draft show.
Okay.
But the masses have been clamoring for more.
Well, good. That's good.
So I've dropped a couple recently, and it's turning into like maybe an every other week thing. So yeah, I'll look you up because this has been a really fun conversation. I've enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And when can people? What articles a week do you? When do you usually come out with your articles every week?
Yeah, so on Football Guys, again, I'm mostly a draft prep guy. So you're looking for legal stuff from me, or I do take part in the Football Guys roundtables. So we talk about the big issues. So you can find that over on footballguys.com. And during draft prep season, I do have a YouTube page titled The Auction Brief, and my podcast is also titled The Auction Brief.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, guys, make sure to follow Drew on Twitter. Anytime anything breaks, you're going to be able to. He's your guy in terms of legal issues and also auctions and just generally good topics in general. So at Drew FBG Auctions, and check out his work on Football Guys, and of course on the podcast as well. And if you go to his Twitter profile, there's a link to everything there. So make sure to check that out. Big thanks to everybody for listening. All of your comments, we appreciate that. Thanks to WinBet for your continuing sponsorship. We got Mario and John back at it again tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jeff.